There we go. And I'll go ahead and start with introductions for our panel. We could really go anyone, but the first person I have, just because it's alphabetical right now, is James. So if you want to just start quick introduction, and then we'll get into the different questions.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. James Serrano. I am a fellow UC Berkeley alum. I graduated in 2020, so right in the middle of the pandemic. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and a minor in Political Economy. I saw we had one psych major in the chat. I think it was Rachel, so shout out to you. Now I work at Heidrick and Struggles, which is an executive search firm. I am an analyst in our Heidrick consulting practice. And what that means is we work a lot with organizations in the Fortune 1000 in building out their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, and also with culture shaping work. And so, a lot of organizations are along different ends of the maturity spectrum and how far along they are in DEI. And so we have a very concerted approach in terms of helping people and meeting them where they are and how to build out their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. And I would not have found that job if it was not for Karen and the Career Center. I used to work at the Career Center as well. And so events like these, I feel like I'm very excited about because it gives me an opportunity to kind of give back and let everybody know about career paths that exist outside of our kind of norm in tech and consulting and all the other kind of buzzwords that you hear around Cal. So very pleased to meet all of you, and I'm excited to kind of go through the rest of this conversation.
Okay. Katrina, you want to go?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Katrina Pantig. My pronouns are she, her, sha, and my role here at Berkeley is as Learning and Development Strategist for the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. I could say a whole lot more. I tend to ramble, so I'm really honored to have the opportunity to share a little bit more about myself and my experience just through these prompts and questions. Thank you for being here. I want to invite LaShonda. Sorry, I don't know if that was a popcorn or what have you, if I wasn't supposed to.
It's giving me teacher popcorn vibes. Okay. I appreciate it. So hi, everyone. My name is LaShonda King. I am also a UC Berkeley alum. My major was sociology and education. I am a mix of things, a lot of things. I have some vocational licenses in like cosmetology and stuff like that, as well as a couple of graduate degrees. I am presently a program manager at Google for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And then separately of that, I do some learning and development and education work through my own company, the Compton Counselor. So I am happy to be here, and I am not, all the panelists look so young that I'm not sure who to popcorn to next. So pop.
I think I'm the only other panelist. Okay. My name is Stefanie, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a fellow sociology major. I graduated in 2008. My focus while at UC Berkeley was poverty. If anyone's had Martin Sanchez Jankowski, shout out to him. He's amazing. And what do I do? Oh, I work at Samsung Research America. I am an HRBP and also the DEIB lead here. And I just want to do a disclaimer. Anything I say today does not reflect the opinions of this corporation. And I'm really excited to be here because I love UC Berkeley. I will tell anybody that, and you are all so lucky to be going there. Thank you.
I'll say the same thing. Anything I say is LaShonda's opinion and doesn't have anything to do with Google.
We don't want our lawyers coming after us, our corporate.
What y'all gonna say? Okay, duly noted. All right, so we have kind of some loose guiding questions. I might also just ask some follow-ups and stuff as it goes on for you all. But I think, and for these, not everyone has to respond to all of them. But for the first one, I think it's appropriate for all of you to respond to, which is just can you give us a brief overview of your current role and basically how you found your way there? And anyone feel free to start.
Okay.
Oh, LaShonda.
So just to reiterate, you said how we find ourselves to our current role. Is that what you want to know, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll throw the prompts too in the chat as I do them. So yeah,
Okay.
a brief overview of what you're currently doing and kind of like the main points of how you got there.
Oh gosh, that's the long question. That's the long answer. So I don't know how to simplify that. So what I currently do now when I work for myself is I will put together different workshops and events and programs for like community organizations, nonprofits. I do a lot of work around education with my public service sorority, Delta Sigma Theta. And so with that area, I'm very involved in that way. And then from a day job, what they call your 9 to 5 versus your 5 to 9, I work for Google as a diversity, equity, and inclusion program manager. And there I manage programs, events, initiatives, and other efforts to make the area of Google that I work in a psychologically safe and inclusive safe and a place where everybody feels like they belong. And then separately, because I do work at that company, you know, it does give me opportunities like this to step out into the community and do different panels, different workshops, and then also be part of organizations like the Black Googlers Network or Pride at Google, you know, where you can use your influence and your role to make an impact in other communities as well. How I got there is a long story. And so like my background is in teaching, like I did Teach for America. I have a background as like a college counselor. I spent 3 years as a LNS undergraduate advisor. And I honestly think that it's a combination of all the different work that I've done, which helped me to get to where I am today.
Okay. So currently I work as a human resource business partner. 50% of my job and the other 50% is diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging lead. So in that role, I take a holistic view of our company and look at the different pillars. So benefits, learning and development, recruiting, our ERGs, and work within the framework to make sure we are having inclusive and progressive benefits, working with ERGs to get their message out and allyship, working with learning and development to make sure that we have trainings where people are learning about the space, and talent acquisition. I'm making sure our that the recruiting function is inclusive, that we are coming at it from an inclusive lens and providing opportunities for everybody, and not just being homogenous and narrow as tech sometimes can be. So that's sort of what I'm doing right now.
I can jump in. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm an analyst here at Heidrick and Struggles. And a lot of what I do on a daily basis is, you know, like from a construction standpoint, and the way the kind of career ladder works in consulting is usually you'll have an analyst, which is my role, and then you have like a consultant, and then an engagement manager, a principal, and then a partner. And at the analyst level, what I'm doing a lot of the times is exactly what it sounds like. I'm analyzing data as it comes in. And from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint, a lot of our engagements might look like, let's say you have a company who just kind of wants to get like a current state analysis on where they're at currently in terms of DEI, right? So we'll have an organization come in and be like, hey, like we don't even know like where we are on this topic, and we want to make some progress in the next 3 years because we're getting a lot of pressure from our stakeholders and like our board, and DEI is a hot topic right now. So obviously everybody kind of wants to level up on their DEI strategy. So they'll come in and they'll ask us to run maybe some focus groups on certain demographics in their organization. So we'll do focus groups on their Black population and their Latinx population, their LGBTQ plus population, and start to kind of aggregate all that data. And then we'll do a desktop review, which involves looking at all their HR stuff, right? So how many people do they actually have in these roles, and what is kind of the employee sentiment that looks or that specific group has, and comparing them up against each other. And then we'll compile all of that information into a diagnostic report, which takes a long time and is a lot of PowerPoint slides. So a lot of my work is, on PowerPoint and on Excel, just kind of pulling all of that together into a story, right? So then you play it back to the client and you're like, this is what your organization looks like right now. This is what it sounds like. This is what people are saying. This is how people are feeling. And so, from that perspective, that was kind of a very high level overview of what DEI in the consulting space looks like, but it's a lot of PowerPoint, it's a lot of emails back and forth, a lot of project management, a lot of organizing, and a little bit of storytelling too, which is fun for me at least. And in terms of how I found my way here, it's actually a pretty interesting question for me. So I'm first gen. My parents immigrated here from the Philippines, and when you're first gen, there are only 4 things that you can be. It's either a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, or a failure. And I was like, I don't want to be a failure. So I was like, oh, Dad, I'm gonna major in psychology. And he's like, oh, you're gonna be a shrink? I was like, no, that's not what I'm gonna be, but we'll see what ends up happening. So ended up working at the Career Center just because I wanted to get a better idea of what else was out there outside of what I was immediately exposed to. And so from there, I think I started there sophomore year, and then worked all the way through my senior year. As I mentioned earlier, Karen was, pivotal in helping me understand what other jobs were out there. She knew my interests really well. So she's definitely a great person to connect with. And so is Jeremy. He was one of both of them were my supervisors. So this is a cool event for me. And from there, Karen had recommended Heidrick and Struggles, just because it seemed like a natural extension of what we were already doing in the Career Center. And I've had some exposure with DEI working at the Wright Institute, which is a psych school that's literally next door to, I think, Unit 1 or something like that. It's right on Channing, I think. You probably pass by it. It looks like a frat house, but you wouldn't see it if you're just walking. Or if you didn't know what you were looking at. And so I found a couple of mentors there who really introduced me to DEI as an industry. I didn't even know this was a job 5 years ago. And so, I kind of merged together my interests and ended up working here. So, long story long, that's kind of how I ended up at Heidrick.
Awesome. I truly feel like I'm among stars with my co-panelists. Hi again, everyone. My name is Katrina. And in terms of my role, so my formal title is Learning and Development Strategist. And for the Office of DEIB, which is situated in a human resources part of the campus, right? Something about DEIB is that it can mean a whole lot of different things depending on where you're at, what's going on. And so that's something that's just interesting about the work in and of itself. But basically, in my role, what I get to do is I get to create cohorted learning programs and experiences for staff employees at the university. And the focus of those learning programs or learning experiences are to help employees increase what we call racial literacy and cultural fluency, right? And those are just some maybe fancy sounding academic words to describe what I would call is a set of values and expectations we are now holding employees and people accountable to so that we can learn, so that we can work in environments and communities that are free of discrimination, right, connected to identity, particularly around race and ethnicity and these different ways people identify. And so that's kind of the way I talk about what I do, right? I really have the opportunity, I have resources in different ways to, produce and cultivate these events, these different types of experiences. Off the top of my head, a couple of examples of what those look like. One of the things I facilitate in my role is called the Berkeley Equity Training Series. And that's actually how I met Jeremy, who was a participant in our fall 2021 inaugural cohort. And so just that as an example, for the Berkeley Equity Training Series, what I do is I invite a group of national thought leaders, experts, recognized experts who come and talk about different topics that is connected to issues of race, identity, and culture, right? And it's a 7-week semester-long experience where on Fridays from 12 to 3 online, we have about 120 staff employees across Berkeley representing different parts of the campus community that come and engage in these sessions for free. It's not something that they're mandated to do. It's something that they apply for. They say they want to participate in. And we have this really immersive experience together. But because of the way we host the format of the program and kind of our intention behind the results, something I'm proud of in particular, using this program as an example, but what I get to do, right, is that I'm really in a place where the institution or the organization I'm in values, right, what it is that I'm trying to do. They recognize the sort of caliber or level of expertise and knowledge we really need in order to be better at our work, right? And so those are some of the things that I get really excited about. And I can go into a lot of the whole technical stuff, but ultimately that's what it is. And so I have a suite of programs that I facilitate in my role. And I would sort of say all of that is kind of my primary focus. But when you work in any organization or entity, there's the things you think are going to happen, there's the things you read about, and there's the culture, right? Which is what really the day-to-day is like. And so although my plate is full with, those things, there's also other parts about my job where I get to do additional things, right? That are not necessarily additional, but you might not have the same level of responsibility over those things. So for example, today's engagement, this is like really fun for me, right? It's really no work. I wish I could do this all day where I get to be invited to participate in things, to facilitate things, to provide consultation, right? To help contribute in some kind of way. So there's a whole lot of things related to that I also get to do. Before I keep sort of going on and on, how did I get here? So I want to kind of organize this into 2 parts, right? I want to talk about my own sort of inner process, right? My own process as an individual philosophically of how I got here. And then I'll tell you, the milestones, the jobs, I've interviewed, I've done all that stuff. Okay. So thinking first about my own process. So something that was important in the getting here, in terms of my job and where I'm at as a professional, was being able to develop and deepen my skills around critical self-reflection and developing self-awareness, right? And that was important because I really had to think through and be mindful of, well, what are my values? What are my priorities for me as a person? What do I care about? What's important to me? What do I want to do? What do I see myself doing? And also the myriad of factors and things that were influencing my decision-making, including the scary, unpredictable world and society we live in, right? Including the sort of expectations and things that came from being also in a first-generation family and growing up in a working class, very diverse area, and different pressures that I felt like I was dealing with, right? And just also not having information. And so being able to think through and make decisions based on what was important for me, I think was really key just in my journey in general, because there's a lot of choices, there's a lot of paths, there's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of pressures, and there aren't really wrong answers. You know what I mean? It's a process. And so I start off with that because that was just really important for me. Now, in terms of the actual things I did and what happened, I'm an alum of the UC system, not of Berkeley. I was waitlisted, but I work here now, so it feels kind of cool. But I earned my degree in sociology from UC Santa Cruz, so I'm a banana slug. And some things that I shared about my background, that was a really, really important time in my life. Being a student was the best time of my career thus far. So being a student is like such an incredible time. During that time as a student, because of what I majored in and the environment I was in, is where I became socially conscious and aware, and developed what I felt were really important foundational tools for critical thinking. And so with that, I was also very engaged as a student. I was a resident advisor, I was a student organizer. I felt like I did everything. And so from that experience, I knew I want to go into education, right? We didn't call it DEI, like we didn't have like those words necessarily, but I had enough experiences and questions and things I thought about that told me, okay, I don't know all the steps and all the pathways, but I know what I want to do generally, and I know what I don't want to do. Right. So all of that experience and just being present in things ended up getting me to the places where after graduating, I was able to have a short stint as a programs coordinator for the ethnic resource centers at UC Santa Cruz. And after that, I worked at my other alma mater for the San Leandro Unified School District as a program coordinator for a school-based health center, which was in a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of things. It was a rough time for me. I experienced some things I didn't know I was going to experience it as a professional. And so after learning some things in that role and leaving, I then did what I call cut my teeth, where I really deepened my skill set, my knowledge, my experience in, the work that I was doing, by working in the community college kind of environment and arena. And a lot of my focus was on teaching teachers, teaching administrators around how do we transform the policies that we have, the practices that we have, and the procedures that we have, so that we can change these outcomes that we knew we were seeing in success data, right, for students and for employees. And so kind of that arc led me to here, where I found that there was an opportunity to engage in an even broader group. I typically had worked with mostly faculty and administrators, because in the community college, that's where a lot of equity focused, that's another word, equity focused research and engagement was happening. And so I was just excited here at Berkeley, at such a large organization, going back to the UCs, that there was, support and building of a DEIB team in HR, which oftentimes not done super well can just be the compliance folks, right? It's not really like, you don't get the invigorating, enriching kind of learning and development. It's really like, let's not get sued, because DEIB means a lot of things to a lot of people based on sort of where you're at. And sorry, I'm just realizing I'm taking so much time. So you got to put timers on people, Jeremy. When I say people, I mean me, because I will struggle.
For sure. No, that's a good segue. Thank you, Katrina. Of like, you're mentioning DEIB can mean a lot of different things. I agree. And sometimes we use it more as like a buzzword. So with that in mind, the next question is kind of what advice, thinking more of maybe what you're doing specifically, each of you, right, in your different roles, what advice would you give to a student that's interested in doing something similar in terms of getting there?
I would say right now, LaShonda, do you want to go? Sorry, I saw you go. Okay. I would say it's a really good time to get into the industry right now. Like, well, maybe not right at this moment, because, I think the job market is starting to tighten, but like just within the last couple of months, like I have the notifications set up on LinkedIn, so that every time there's like a new DEI job that pops up in my area, I get like a little notification on the job section. And every time I look, there's like hundreds of new jobs that are available. So if this is something that you're like kind of interested in, I would definitely encourage you to, do your research on what the company itself looks like, and, where they stand on DEI. And every company now, if you look on their website, has a DEI webpage. And there are companies that you can tell whether or not it's kind of like lip service, or whether or not they walk the talk, right? And eat their own cooking. And so, screen for that. I think that's something that everybody is paying attention to at the moment. And along with that, I feel like if you're at this panel and if you're interested in DEI, what I kind of realized is like it's going to end up showing up in whatever job you do anyways, right? Like I know that is kind of how I fell into this industry. I was already doing DEI work in college at the Career Center. I was working a lot with like first gen students and giving back, and it was something that was core to my identity. And so I found myself in these opportunities and these roles anyways. And I was like, oh, I can make an actual like career out of it. Like that's kind of cool. And so if you have kind of like that interest or even that inkling, like pursue it, right? And just see how far you can get. And the cool thing about like our careers is that it's not just a one and done thing. You have 20, 30 years to kind of figure it out and see what it is you like and don't like. And every experience you have is just like another data point pulling you into the right direction. So feel free to make mistakes, like go to events like this, connect with people afterwards as well. Like if anything either of us are saying is really resonating with you, like reach out to us, email us, text us, LinkedIn us, whatever. And we're, happy to kind of, make ourselves available. Or I shouldn't speak for everybody, but I do.
I'm definitely happy to speak to that. So like I mentioned earlier, my background is school counseling as well as academic advising. So this question is right up my alley. So being part of an underrepresented group and equity being very, very important to me, I've always kind of been in organizations or had jobs that would fall under the umbrella of DEI. So like I worked at the EOP office, I was in the Black Recruitment and Retention Center when I was a student at Cal. And so those organizations are to increase recruitment and retention. So of people of color or from underrepresented groups. So the first thing I would say is while you're a student at Cal, involve yourself in campus and community organizations that center the work of particular communities, because that's where you start to get your foundation. And also don't just be a member of those organizations, join a planning committee, co-chair or take a leadership role, because those are going to give you some of the actual business skills that you need to go along with it. Also, a lot of people think about DEI as this like kind of mystical thing, and it's very broad. So say you're a business major, you could be focusing on how to, like you could work for eBay and strategize how to have a more diverse group of vendors. You could work for, Google if you're an education major and be focused on creating pre-collegiate programs in communities of color. So I don't want you to think that DEI is one thing. I want you to focus on what you're passionate about, what you're interested in, and then think about how DEI and belonging like touches that, and then kind of focus on that. Definitely would suggest looking into, I'm not sure if the Career Center still has it, but the externship program is really great. Definitely look into internships. And then the more practical advice is to keep in mind that everything in business has to have a business case. And what that means is it has to make sense for the company to invest money in it. So like my role at Google for the team that I'm on is new. So the vice president that I work under, he had to think, oh, it's worth it for my team to feel included and diverse. So I'm going to put this amount of money for a salary for a new person. So in order to make the business case, you also have to actually have skills. So one thing I would recommend to you all, and a lot of people don't know that this is a resource. So we know LinkedIn, right, as a platform for, connecting and networking. And now they've introduced their LinkedIn learning courses. That is a really, really valuable place to earn certificates, like a project or program management certification and things like that. Another thing that people don't know, because LinkedIn Learning does cost money, and I don't know if the Career Center has any access or if the library does. That's what I was going to say. So as a student, you all have access to these LinkedIn learning portals for free. There's also other portals like Coursera. There's things like lynda.com. And so some of those things that cost money, there are ways to access them for free through the public library. So people think of libraries as just having books, but they have a lot of free digital resources. So LinkedIn Learning may not be free when you graduate, but it is free through the Berkeley City Library as well as the San Francisco Library. All you need is a California ID to sign up for a library card, and you can access those for free. So while DEI is who you are, it's what you do, is what you're passionate about. I can't just walk up to Google and say, hey, I'm Black and queer and neurodiverse and a woman and from the hood and first gen. So hire me because I'm from these diverse backgrounds. I have to say, no, I know how to manage a budget. I know how to, collaborate with other people. I know how to come up with ideas and see them through from ideation to, pushing it out to evaluating it and doing it again. I can scale it up, which means to, push it up higher to more people. So you also have to have program or project management skill sets or marketing or whatever different skills in order to go with your DEI background. So that would be my very concrete advice is while you're in school, definitely look up some ways to get more specific education in leadership positions.
Cool. Yeah, and if you're interested in connecting more with those, I'm willing to meet with anyone too and talk about the different orgs and stuff. The lead center is a good resource, but yeah, those different retention centers and stuff we have good relationships with at the Career Center too and try to work with. So feel free to follow up, but that's really good advice, LaShonda. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question, which I'm just going to throw in the chat as well, just so we're all on the same page, which is just what is the most enjoyable aspect of your professional life and the least enjoyable, and how would you navigate? How do you navigate each of those?
I'll go. I've been thinking about this recently. As everyone on the panel, I'm sure can attest, the life of a DEIB program manager, lead specialist, whatever you want to call yourself, is very frustrating. You're told no a lot, you're rejected a lot, you're asked why a lot. Why is this important? Why should this be important to me? That is that's the least enjoyable part of the job, right? Sometimes you just want to throw your hands up and be like, is this worth it? Is this stress worth it? But then you think, yes, it is, because this is my passion and I know that this is important. I know that this will impact so many people, not just that are currently at the company, but future employees. If you're working within the community, you're impacting the community that you live in. So that is one of the most enjoyable, beautiful parts of being in this industry. And to build on everything that everybody else said, like, I think being at Berkeley, you already have that in you to be a DEIB specialist. So.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, at least something that I learned kind of in the last year and a half that I've spent here at Heidrick, because we're at an executive search firm, we're dealing a lot of the times with like the top of the house, with senior executives. And, as we've kind of conceived through the data, a lot of senior executives are your like typical middle-aged, like white males. And those are typically the people who are saying no and might be a little bit defensive when it comes to DEI. And the thing that I feel like kind of excites me, or the thing that challenges me every day, is figuring out how to bring them along too, right? And like the storytelling and the skill set that it involves to not be inclusive of people who may not see themselves in diversity, equity, and inclusion, at least the way it's been historically messaged. And I feel like a lot of that takes finesse, it takes storytelling, It takes finding a common ground. And because that's, to me, is really what inclusion is, right? Diversity is about how we are all uniquely different and how all of that should be valued. But inclusion is finding all of those kind of connection points that bring us together. So it's definitely a challenge to do that on a daily basis. And sometimes, like, believe me, I'm like beating my head up against the wall to try and say the same thing to somebody just so that they kind of get it. But you know, it's a learning process to be able to figure out how to get people and what's going to click and connect with people so that they do say yes the next time around. There are a lot of different ways to do that as well, right? Like at Heidrick, we have this framework that we call, and this is a little bit of our IP, so hopefully, you know, I don't know if we can bleep this out in the recording or what we can do, but I'll give you all a little nugget. It's like we all lead, so to really activate and accelerate diversity, equity, and inclusion, leaders need to lead with their head, heart, guts, and their hands. And a lot of the times we go straight from the head, getting like the factual and data information all the way to the hands. But you forget to kind of internalize that piece in the heart and get the courage in your guts to really activate an inclusive learning experience or to make people feel like they really belong. And so being able to kind of, it's kind of like I remember AP language in junior year high school. It's like your pathos, ethos, and logos. So getting all of that, I feel like LaShonda, that triggered something for you. But you know, it's connecting with people on a deeper level than just what the business case is, right? It's getting people to kind of internalize, you know, the work that we do. That's like the fun part, at least.
I'll go real quick. The most enjoyable aspect of what I get to do, I would say, is being able to actually participate and be in the work, like, you know, when things are going well as far as programs or trainings or the actual projects, but seeing the impact that comes from it. So, you know, after assessing how are we doing, right? Like, you know, what impact is this making? You know, seeing the positive feedback, of course, in particular, but all feedback is helpful. But when I'm seeing the connections that, you know, people feel like what we're doing is really helping them be better in their work, helping them respond to issues or address things that they have tried to figure out or think through, but just haven't had the space or time to think through that and get support around that. So those are things that are enjoyable, and the relationships and all of it, right? I think relationships are just super important also in your work. So being able to build a sense of community in the job is enjoyable for me. I would say the least enjoyable, and this is just with my personalities, is having to deal with conflict, having to manage and deal with conflict, as well as being frustrated when you don't have the supports that you need to do your job, but you're accountable for the results. And that happens sometimes, especially when you're in a, you know, place like university where there's bureaucracies, like no one knows what's going on, right? Like, it's just like you're, you know, it's like you think people are playing a joke on you or you're doing something wrong, but no, systems, bureaucracy, traditions, like these things are complex. They're not something we're always like naturally good at, right? And so I'm a person who deals with anxiety. And so when I think about dealing with conflict and trying to solve things when I don't have even a grain of, you know, sand of what I need, you know, sometimes that happens and it stresses me out. But what I've learned is about navigating it is that everything's about learning. You know, it is to not judge myself, is to give myself grace, is to look at things as opportunities, right? And just accept things kind of how, you know, how they are. And it's a personal takeaway, because I don't know if that's something that people struggle with, but anxiety, mental health, anything you might be dealing with, we're living in an intense society, right? Like, that's real. And so I say that not to be like, here's my personal problems, but just to be real that sometimes things about your professional work will trigger that. But I've found looking at everything as an opportunity, and looking as everything as a way to learn, right? And not a judgment of myself, right? As something has been super helpful for me to navigate the fun stuff and the not so fun stuff. So that's what I have to say to that.
Katrina, I don't know what you're talking about. I have everything together, so can't relate. I'm just kidding. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask one more kind of formal question, and then I think with the current size, we'll just see if there's any last questions from the students, and we'll kind of go there. And then if you want to share the best way to contact you, you can. But this is the last formal question from me I'll throw in the chat, which is just, I think a lot of folks are interested in this kind of work, but aren't really quite sure how to reach out and engage with folks doing this kind of work, if that's fair. So just any advice on that specific aspect of meeting with and connecting with professionals in your field.
I can jump on. I am not a shy person, but I know that a lot of people are shy, so I'll speak to that perspective more so. One thing I will say is that UC Berkeley has a really strong alumni network, so I would definitely suggest utilizing that. Also, LinkedIn has a feature, and just like Facebook, all the algorithm-based applications do, saying people who you may know, or common connections. I would suggest to maybe say you have 2 people in common with somebody who you want to reach out to, and you don't feel comfortable sending a message. Just reach out to the 2 people that you do know and say, hey, I saw that you're connected to such and such. If you're connected, would you mind giving me a warm introduction? And so what that means is that person would create a message that includes you and the other person. Also, when you're at networking and other events, make it a point to reach out to people. I do coach people with social anxiety and stuff like that, so I understand that it's hard, but you have to set some tangible goals for yourself. So think SMART goals, so specific, measurable, attainable, realistic and time bound. But so say, okay, when I go to this conference, I'm going to talk to 2 people and this is my goal. It doesn't have to be like super crazy. I recommend, if you're shy or anxious, scripting what you may say in advance, creating an elevator pitch for yourself. So, hi, my name is LaShonda. I'm a 4th-year student at Cal, majoring in sociology. I'm really interested in pursuing a career in DEI, and I see that that's something that you do. Are you comfortable with jumping on a call with me for an informational interview? Or, are there resources that you would recommend I look into to learn more about what you do? So although it's not as easy for people who identify as socially anxious or shy, or however you want to term it, there's a term we say in the hood and probably elsewhere in the world: closed mouths don't get fed. And so you have to learn how to open your mouth in order to get what it is that you want.
And I want to follow on that. I think one of the beautiful things about being in this space is that everyone is so generous. So if you were to reach out to someone with a DEIB in their title, or you went to a panel and wrote a bunch of names down and you were to connect with them and reach out, nobody's going to reject you. Everybody is so passionate and excited about this, and they know the work is so important. They want you to join in. So don't ever feel like you'll be rejected. I've had random people reach out to me at all times, and I'm happy to connect with people. I will take an informational interview at any time. I think this is such an important space to work in. We need more people to be working in it and passionate about it, because that's the thing about DEIB. I personally don't ever, I think this role should go away. Like, companies and society should be a well-oiled machine that we're all in this together and working in this together, and it's part of who we are as humans. So there won't be any need for this role. But right now there is a need for this role. So don't be shy, or be shy and write a scripted message like LaShonda said, but everyone is so generous, you'll find.
I will agree with you, Stefanie, like 99%. The 1% I'll say is that sometimes people in these roles do experience burnout. So like, I know that I went to one job interview and I would have been the only DEI person for a 3,000 person company. And so sometimes you meet people at a stage in life where they're overwhelmed, overworked. When you do the work, like, I mean, I'm Black, you know, so during the height of like George Floyd and things like that, like I may not have the emotional capacity to give of myself. So don't take that personally. Don't take that as a person who's not interested in sharing. I agree with Stefanie. Like, those of us who are in this field are passionate about the field, but if for some reason they're not, or they're not responsive, it gets busy doing this work. It gets very exhausting. It gets tiring. You get caregiver burnout, compassion fatigue, and things like that. So I just want to say that, because sometimes, you know, people may get pessimistic about it. They might work in an environment where, like Katrina said, you're constantly fighting and being told no, and like the bureaucracy gets to you. So they might be like, I don't want this new bright-eyed and bushy-tailed alum to come into, you know, the chaos of this field. So don't let people who are jaded, scorned, or having like compassion fatigue like deter you. Just find somebody else to talk to.
All right, I'm going to, thank you, LaShonda. I'm going to end it there for the formal questions and just leave the remaining time. If there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand with that function. I guess you could do it literally too. And I'll call on you. And then for our panelists, if there is a way that you're willing to let people reach out to you, if you want to share that in the chat, you could do that now too. So yeah, any questions, feel free to ask in the chat or raise your hand at this point. All right, Stefanie.
Hi, my name is Stefanie. My pronouns are they, she. I actually also majored in sociology. Currently doing a master's program right now. So have y'all ever had situations where you're trying to push for a DEI initiative and you have pushback? And how do you handle that? How do you, when you're especially very passionate about that initiative?
Anyone want to take that? I'm sure people have experienced pushback.
I would say yes. And just the quick thing I'll say is that something that a strategy that's helpful in dealing with pushback in general is in preparing your pitch or what that opportunity is, and in responding to what the resistance might be, always showing the connection between what it is your initiative or your work is trying to do and how it's aligned with, you know, the organization or the environment, or, you know, so it's not something extra, right? This is what we said we wanted, right? This is what we said we cared about. So that's all I wanted to share. But I've absolutely dealt with pushback.
I haven't personally experienced the pushback because, you know, mind you, I'm working with folks, like we're all kind of like drinking the Kool-Aid when it comes to DEI, but I have seen our clients experience a lot of that pushback after we've kind of come in, given them the strategy, given them an action plan, et cetera. A lot of times people don't fully buy in. And what you have to remember there is this is tough work. Like DEI is, and, you know, I think that sentiment has been kind of driven across this entire panel. But what you're really doing is changing people's behavior at its core, and changing behavior for folks who might be 30, 40 years in the game, like that's not an easy thing to do. So this is a part of what I was saying earlier. It's also kind of like the fun part, like when you figure out what it is that does click with that person, you know, you want to make sure that you continue to leverage that. So it's a constant game of being able to kind of read people and read the audience and kind of respond in that way. And, you know, I think that fluidity and that flexibility and being able to kind of be agile in your approach and your strategy only makes you a better DEI consultant or DEI practitioner. So, you know, always take that pushback and that rejection with a growth and learning mindset, because it'll only make you better for the next time.
I think that's some great advice. What I would say, Stefanie, is to keep your ideas in a Google Doc or somewhere where you always have access to all the amazing and beautiful ideas that you have. Not every idea, just think about like shoes, right? not every pair of shoes is going to fit every person. Like some people might be your Cinderella and some people are ugly stepsisters. So keep all those ideas in your database, flesh them out as detailed as you can. And along the way in your journey, whether you believe in God, law of attraction, you'll find the places where you can like do that work. One thing that I really want to stress, and this is my counseling side talking, is do not take it personally. And so the 4 Agreements is a book for that. So, you know, you may have an amazing program. You're super passionate about it. And you might get told no, and there might be a business reason. There might be a conflict of interest. There might be something that you don't know about that they know about at the C-suite or the higher levels. And it doesn't mean that, okay, my little nephew has hydrocephalus. So we always say his motor skills are delayed but not denied. So sometimes you could be told no for a project in Q1 of the year, but then maybe in Q4 they have some extra budget and extra funds. And they're like, hey, Stefanie, you remember that program you wanted to do? I think we have money for it now. So like, that's another thing to consider. And also just know your audience, come with data. I think, you know, Katrina mentioned that earlier. James was fortunate because people come to him to ask for help with DEI. So his experience is a little bit different than, you know, some of ours, but like, just know that your ideas are amazing, but that they may not fit the feet or the place that you're in this one moment in life, but you have a lifetime of greatness and a full career ahead of yourself. So like, keep your head up, like Tupac said.
LaShonda just hitting us with all these quotable quotes. Jeez. Got a lot in there. I think we have time for one more question. Rachel, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I had a question perhaps in a slightly similar vein of audience response. But I was thinking that when I first came across this field as a freshman, it was referred to as like inclusion or DNI. And then I started hearing more DEI, and now this event is called like DEIB roles. And you know, the work is like very important regardless of like the changing terminology. But I was wondering if you have any like confused people like within your organizations or like your clients, and how you navigate like the terminology, and also just all like the definitions that, you know, if someone doesn't really care about it at first, how do you convince someone?
Yeah, I can speak to this because this is something that I get mixed up with all the time. Like we call it like the alphabet soup of DEI, and it really is like that. But to me, what it signals is context for that specific organization, right? Like how far along are they in this journey, and what are they prioritizing? So if it's, you know, a couple of years ago, like you mentioned, you saw a lot of it was diversity and inclusion. And then there was a pivot to inclusion and diversity because people realized that, you know, we need to be an inclusive culture first before we start even attracting all of these diverse professionals. And then equity started to kind of emerge into the conversation as a way of creating a common ground for everybody so that, you know, we can all uplift the folks that may have not been as privileged in their past to kind of have all the same opportunities. Now, belonging is coming in, justice, et cetera, et cetera. And so it does get confusing, very confusing, especially when you're preparing like formal documents for people and now you're like getting all of this mixed up. And so I think what it does, like I mentioned earlier, is it provides context on that organization and shows you how far along they are. Berkeley, being in the Bay Area, having the reputation it has, it's historically been like super progressive on this topic. So DEI, DJ, crazy that we got like 5, you know, acronyms in there, but nonetheless, like it just shows kind of how advanced and progressive the thinking is. I'll pause there. LaShonda, I feel like you got something more insightful to say.
First of all, I don't do minimization on my watch. That was extremely insightful, James. So thank you for sharing that with us. I laugh because I am part of the queer community. So it's like, oh, all the old school folks are like, well, it was just gay and lesbian when I was a kid, you know, then it's LGBT, then it's LGBTQ, then it's LGBTQIA plus. So thinking about, you know, the alphabet of DEI, I would just say to try your best to stay abreast of what the different changes are, because that's any field, right? Like if I'm a doctor, I'm going to stay abreast of the new procedures, you know, for my medical specialty. If I'm an electrician, I have to still stay abreast. So stay abreast of what's happening. And I don't think that that language is actually, or the title is an indicator of the progression, because I work at Google, who tries to really be like a forerunner and diversity stuff, right? But they don't have the B on there yet. And so, but it is something that we're talking about, because if you think about like diversity and inclusion, if you can recruit 100 diverse people, but if they get there and they don't feel included, then they're not going to stay. So then conversations about recruitment versus retention happen, right? And then you start thinking about, well, we recruited this 100 people, but like, you know, this many are women, this many are men, this many are Black women, and the intersectionality creates an inequity in pay and treatment. So then you think about equity, and then it's like, okay, well, you paid me enough, you got enough of us, but you know, these people are kind of looking at me like I'm a janitor when I really work here as a Googler. So do I really feel like I belong, right? And then the new thing, you have places where people are being treated poorly, or say I started off with a 70% lower salary, and now my company needs to remediate that and over time and think about salary equity, then that's a form of justice. So I don't think that like you have to feel like you know all the terms, because I didn't even know that J was a thing, but because I work in this area as a Black person, I definitely know that justice is important. But so don't let the letters make you think that a company isn't where they are, but just try to stay abreast and understand the complexities of like the level. It's levels to this. That's all. I'll just say that.
For sure. Thank you, everyone. For sake of time, I really appreciate that. We'll do a quick round of applause for our panelists. Ooh, it's mostly going to be muted. Sorry, do the virtual. But thank you to everyone who came tonight and shared space with us. I know it's a business. Wow, busy and hectic time. I just moved this week. I'm tired. I felt you, Katrina, when you're like, oh, stress. Like I've been moving and working and stuff, and so moving and shaking. Oh, so I feel it. I appreciate everyone being here. Again, thank you for sharing your contact info, folks. Feel free to follow up with Karen and I as well if you want to talk more about this kind of stuff. And I will try to upload this soon to the Career Center's YouTube channel, and we can share it as well. But thank you, everyone, so much for being here.
All right, thank you.